This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking about how one day to exit stage left. Well, I will tell you, Exit Stage Left Advisors had some great experience with a firm called Southstone Holdings, and I have the founders here today, John and Jeff. How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. Thanks for having us, Lee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, guys, we've had a great experience with your firm, and one of our organizations here at ESL Advisors and Ben Hollyfield closed a deal with you, which is really exciting, and that's a really hard thing to discuss and get through. It's hard to get a deal done. I want to jump into that later in the show, but I want to bring in your history. I want to talk about you, Jeff, and you, John, and how you got started in the industry. So, Jeff, tell us how you got started.
Yeah, sort of by accident. I took 0 finance classes in college or any time before that, but ended up working at the Home Depot and the M&A practice for about 4 years. And then went and worked for a large private equity firm in Atlanta for about 10 years. Loved the work, loved the people, loved the math, the combination of sort of the right brain and left brain that came together. But in 2011, I also launched a small business myself with 2 partners called Monday Night Brewing. It's a craft brewery here in Atlanta.
What was your title there?
So my first title on my business card, because we could do whatever we wanted, we were a small startup craft brewery, was Supreme Beer Chancellor. Over time, yes. I had to clarify, change job titles to actually help people understand what I did.
Sure.
But I actually left my private equity firm about 5 years after the business started to help run that. So I served as CEO and co-founder there for about 8 years. And so loved this intersection of the operator world and the investing world.
Wow. John, talk about your background.
Yeah, like Jeff, I think I kind of stumbled my way into private equity. So I graduated college, had no connection to Atlanta, and moved down here to work at a consulting firm. Just knew
Which college?
Went to University of Virginia, and then came down to work at a firm here called Bain. But just knew I liked people and problems, and tried to get a wide variety of all sorts of problems I could work on, and found my way into private equity from there.
So, everybody mocks the term private equity, right? You see so many funny memes out there.
We do too.
Yeah.
Yes, I do as well.
For good reason.
For good reason. And I want to talk about later, and we talked about our relationship with our firm and how valuable it is to have these VIP buyers, not only that can do a transaction successfully, but also we've talked to our clients that you bought their organization. They love you, and private equity has a bad name. Before we get down that road, talk about you guys meeting. Like, how did this happen and kind of what was the connection?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. Originally met during COVID. So when I was working at the consulting firm, they had a program where you could go on loan. It's like a European soccer loan. You could say, go work somewhere for 3 months. You can go work at the NFL. You can go work at a nonprofit. I wanted to work in what I had in my mind was a real business. And so had known Jeff a little bit loosely from Atlanta and kind of walked up and said, hey, can I come work for you for 3 months? I thought it'd be an easy break from the consulting grind. And my first day was March 2nd of 2020. And so the world just shut down, and we got really close in that season and worked hand in hand to kind of pivot the business and save it and get through COVID. And when we left, we were like, hey, now's not the right time, but we have to do something together.
So wait, you started working at the brewery?
I did, yeah, just for 3 months. And so
holy mackerel.
That's where we got close.
At the most tumultuous time of our history as a company.
Sure. Yeah. We were just talking about this on a previous episode that I think Georgia was the first state in the country, I think in May, to open its doors for, I remember, movie theaters and bowling alleys and even food types of environments. Did you know people in your space in other states that were just crippled having events or having any type of retail happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It was devastating for a lot of other breweries in different states. We actually had slightly more strict because we were in the city of Atlanta, and so it extended for a bit longer for us. But we were constantly pivoting and changing what we had to do based on the latest.
So you were in the PE space. You left to do the brewery. You meet John. You guys connect. What's the impetus for the next move for you guys at that point?
Well, for me, it came down to that the brewery had grown to a point where, frankly, I had built a great team who could run the daily day-to-day operations. It's near and dear to my heart. I love it very much. And I'm still very engaged with it. But I started thinking about what's the next chapter vocationally for me. And I'd spent 10 years investing, and I'd spent a decade running and operating a small business. And so when John and I started kicking around the idea of investing, immediately we were drawn to small businesses where relationships matter, where you have to get your hands dirty, and where you can create real value over the long run. And so that informed a lot about how we built Southstone.
So talk about the name. I was wondering, how did that come up?
So
It's a good story.
It's a great story. So I was in South France with my family. We actually, this was a few years ago, and we were walking up this old sort of cobblestone street in a small town, and there was a building on the side of the road, just a very ordinary little apartment building, and it had the word or the numbers like 1542 etched into the side of the stone. And it just struck me of the endurance that stone has over any other building material that is used. And so South is sort of the allusion to our focus, which is in the Southeast.
Okay.
And stone is those are the kinds of businesses that we're really interested in. Companies and cultures and people who have built things to last.
Yeah, so talk about that mission critical type of industry, right? That's what we hear all the time. Everybody thinks of PE, they think of technology, they think of multiples in the double digits sometimes, which is always shocked me, and I could spend an hour talking about that. But talk about how important these mission critical things that AI are not going to solve. Do you look into that, John?
Yeah, happy to do that. We call it like backbone businesses. The businesses are just the backbone of the country, and I think there's a lot of industries that were the same in 1995, that they're same in 2025, and they're same in 2045. That we can add some technology and add some talent, but by and large, they need to happen kind of in the same way, and that's where we focus.
So how do you go out and look for someone? Again, let's talk about and congratulate Academy Fence, right?
Yes,
your very excited. First acquisition, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to be going well. Talk about that process where you were searching for an organization. What really turned you guys on? Because for viewers out there, they want to know, what is private equity looking for? Not just, as you said, those mission critical backbone companies, but what about the people, the business? We know the location. Talk a little more about that.
Yeah.
I think it really starts with the people and the culture. I think at the end of the day, that's what small business is. It's a collection of people that are on a mission together to solve a problem for customers or create a product. And so I think that's the first thing we look at with these businesses is, are these people that we want to work with and have a great culture already that we can come in and build upon what they've already built.
So we're talking about that success. While you were looking at that business, were you guys looking at other businesses, and are you still looking at other businesses?
Yeah, we're actively looking at several other businesses right now. That's what we are excited to do is continue to, and a lot of times these processes take a long time. So I know in my career, there have been businesses we've been had conversations with for sometimes 2, 3, 4 years.
No way, that long.
Before we actually consummated a transaction. And so we take the long game. We have one thing that's different about us, we have a very long fund life, so we're not under pressure to sell in 5 years. We think that building good things takes a long time.
So for our viewers out there, when you talk about fund life, elaborate on what that means.
Yeah, I can tell you one. I think one of the ways that we are most different than traditional private equity is that fund life, how long we plan to hold things. So a lot of traditional private equity is buy and flip. It's like buying and flipping houses. If you buy something, you make some changes, maybe you gut it, maybe you add up a little bit of paint, and then you flip it and sell it to the next guy. I think our model is focused on finding businesses we want to hold for the long run.
Fair.
Which makes the people matter per our earlier conversation, but makes us allowed to invest for the long haul.
So go into, we talked about that success. Talk about some opportunities that you would go dig into. You would meet opportunities that you want to buy or acquire, but things that didn't work out. What were the reasons, like top 3 things or top 3 organizations that you started going down the process and it didn't work out? Just so people can learn, this is what the buyers are looking for and what they're not looking for.
Yeah. I'll give a couple of examples. One would be businesses that don't have a strong history of profitability. So, when you're buying a business and paying a multiple of those earnings, you want to feel confident that it's not just a flash in a pan, but it's in something that has had an enduring history of profitability and growth. So that's probably first and foremost. So there have been opportunities that, have had a good 1 year or 2 years, but you look back over time and there's more risk there, more volatility.
Fair.
I'd say customer concentration is probably the other big one that comes to mind of, hey, does one customer make up 80% of your revenues a given year, or is your biggest customer 10% and you're well diversified?
What is that break-even number for you in your mind? Or what's that breaking number? If it's smaller than a certain number, larger than a certain number, what would it be?
It's a good question. I think it depends a little on the industry,
Sure.
But I would say 15 to 20% is where I start to think about it. And then I would say anything into 30 to 40% feels like a high risk.
So for viewers out there that are considering this, if they're in the 30, 40 or higher, is there something they can do to offset that, like a long-term contract or some type of contingencies?
Yeah, I think contracts are great. Like if you can lock that in for 3 years, let's say, that gives a buyer a lot more comfort. Or just working to diversify and find a new customer base or that second big customer.
And a lot of times that means too that you just have to temper your valuation expectations because there's just more risk to a pretty significant portion of your profitability.
So now I love that we can dialogue like this, guys, right? Because you guys are the experts in this space and most people just don't know these answers. You know, you are the very first private equity firm that we've had on the show, which is amazing. Yeah. So it's the locality is.
They usually dress a little fancier, most of them. Your typical
no, but that's the best part
guys.
about you guys. This is who you are, which is the greatest part and why our client loved you and why it was a match made in heaven. So go back a little bit to the numbers. And, you know, I'm fortunate to speak across the country in M&A. And I remember sitting in a room and people wanted to know, you know, my clients are burnt out. They're ready to sell. And I said, that's actually the worst time for someone to sell. So give me some of the worst things, such as flat or decreasing revenue and profits, such as a burnt out, unless the individual can be replaced or has a great generation too. Give me some scenarios where you say these are the worst times to try to sell.
Yeah. Certainly, if you don't have a good, if you want out, but you don't have a good, clear succession plan that has some track record already, you might have a great VP of sales that you really like, but is that person really ready to step into a CEO role and oversee manufacturing, say? And so having a really clear transition plan and then having some traction behind that can get a buyer comfortable is a really important piece.
A week before going to market, don't just hire someone to put in there. Is that what you mean?
That's
okay,
right.
Just
that's
making
exactly
sure
right.
that's important. What about, go ahead, John.
I was going to add one thing too. I would say one thing that we love that we get to do and we're doing here with this fence company we just bought is take the things off the owner's plate that they don't want to do and make the job fun again. And so I think we're working with this current owner who loves to sell. He wants to get out in the field. He hates scheduling. And so we're like, hey, great. We can bring in someone to help you schedule and take that off your plate, but help us grow this and take it to the next level and make it fun again.
Yeah.
So how important is it for private equity? I'm calling you guys private equity, but it's true. I mean, in the general
private, we provide equity.
Technically,
precisely.
So,
Technically.
But there's all different flavors and shapes and sizes. But how is it important for private equity to have owners? And we don't need to go into the deal structure of what you currently do. It's very confidential. But is important to buy the entire business. Talk about three things: buying fully the business, buying with rolling equity, buying with earnouts. Talk about what those are and how they apply to a deal.
Yeah. So I would say, and I'll take them from the third down to the first.
Fair.
So for an earnout, really the purpose of an earnout is when there's a disconnect between the valuation expectations of a buyer and a seller. Yep. An earnout is an elegant way to say, hey, you believe this thing is going to grow. I'm a little more skeptical. If you grow it like you think you're going to do, we'll pay you the higher price.
Yep. And then you pay the higher price over time.
Over time, that's right. So we need to see a track record and see results before you're going to earn that out. With rolling equity, the biggest place where that's helpful is if you have an owner or seller who's instrumental to the business and sticking around, and so it incentivizes that seller to continue to have some skin in the game, so that they can be a part of growing it and ideally take some more chips off the table, even more chips off the table later down the road. And then the last is oftentimes when the seller wants out and sometimes the buyer wants them out. It's just a way to make a nice clean break. And so those I think are some quick thoughts on.
There's a lot of information mismatch between a seller who knows this business for years or decades and us who spent 90 days learning a business. And so we ask a lot of questions, but ultimately the seller just knows way more. And so when you roll equity, when you reinvest in the business, that gives us a lot of confidence that you're willing to bet on this thing moving forward as well.
Right. Exactly. You're vested.
Yeah. And we're aligned. And I think that's when we talk about relationships is such a central part of like the relationship between an owner, like a private equity investor, and the operators or the sellers. Man, there's nothing that creates greater alignment than being joint shareholders, co-owning the business together.
Makes sense. I like that a lot. So talk about, guys, when you make an acquisition, we talk about those three models. Do you prefer one? Of course, the equity-based one, where someone is sharing in that equity. But aggregation, like an example is you purchase your first firm, which is a fence company. Are you looking to stay in the fence space, or are you looking at all industrial spaces across the board, or all of the above?
Do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. I think we liked the fence industry. We liked but we also really liked this company and this business. And so I think for us, it always starts with the underlying drivers of what is this business. There are absolutely private equity firms out there that are a very narrow focus on a specific industry. There are others that will kind of buy anything, call themselves industry agnostic.
Sure.
But I think for us, we're looking at businesses that have similar attributes to the fence company that we bought. So enduring businesses that, like John said, are the same 20 years ago, will be the same in the future, have good cash flow generation, have a path to growth, and then are generally in the Southeast. And so that's another thing if you're considering selling your business, is ask what are the kinds of things that are important to me as a seller, and who I want to take this, and who might be interested in the kinds of business.
The more I'm listening to you guys, the more you don't feel like private equity to me, you feel like a family office.
There are a lot of similarities.
I think that's a great analogy. Yeah. I think we're private equity in a sense. We've got investors and we're investing in the private markets.
Sure.
But we probably operate a lot more like a family.
Because I've always perceived private equity, and just for our audience listening out there, private equity is I'm aggregating, I'm buying and making it larger and larger because size matters, and then I'm going to sell it and flip it. Where that isn't your game plan, and family offices feel like they're cross-pollinating their services. So if you could have another business that has a certain pool of clientele that can utilize the fence and the fence utilize them, you can really cross-pollinize across your entire family office.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think private equity has kind of become a dirty word. One of my favorite emails that I ever received last fall was an owner or seller that we built a relationship with. The first email I got back was, "We're not interested in selling private equity." But that opened an opportunity to share about how we're different and how we take some of the good, but have a different approach.
So, hopefully you guys walk away going, we're going to call ourselves family offices. Yeah. It's a lot less of aggressive.
Family office, I've heard many people say that if you've met one family office, you've met one family office, because they're all really very, very different.
Oh, that's really funny. I love that.
So I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot that's true about private equity in the same way.
Sure.
Especially in the sort of lower middle market.
So Southstone Holdings, guys, talk about the next layer for you. What is your future? What is your growth?
I think we would love to just do more deals like the one we just did with this fence company. I think we'll be able to do a handful of deals, just the two of us, and then we'd love to be able to grow and build out a small team to better serve these companies.
So are you going to be adding team members? What is the next 6 months? I mean, you're mapping out and growing the fence company now, but is it the shoe cobbler that doesn't have shoes for himself? Are you thinking of all the other businesses versus your business? Have you done a self-evaluation?
It's a good question. I think, the first hire we made was actually someone in this fence company. So the seller was 60 and does a lot right, but like we said, wanted to have some help on things like scheduling and technology.
Sure.
And so on day one, we've actually got a guy who comes from this industry who's going to be able to step in and bring some tech and talent. And so I'd say that's where our initial focus is helping the businesses hire talent and then worry about ourselves later.
Do you offer financial services for all of your businesses? Will you be planning with new acquisitions to centralize services, or are you going to keep them all individual?
It's a good question. I think that's pretty low on the priority list for us. I mean, I know from just running a small business that there are lots of quirks and ins and outs to how things run at every single space. I mean, even within the home builders who the Academy Fence serves, they all have the home builders who are their customers have different invoicing processes.
Fair.
And so I think there's a danger. This is one of the places I think private equity gets wrong sometimes, is trying to aggregate or synthesize or centralize shared services in ways that make sense on paper and to a financial brain, but actually on the ground doesn't add a lot more value. You'd be better served to go hire a new salesperson, put a system in place that helps them be more efficient with their time, invest in some digital marketing. So I'm going to have to ask you a tough question before we wrap up here. Just 15 minutes flies like that. So Jonathan, I'll point at you first. Is in this process of your most recent success, and again, people viewing this are going to look and go, gosh, these guys make it seem so easy. Because it sounds very easy. You're making it simplified. I know how hard it is. Give me one of the biggest mistakes that happened in this last deal. You don't have to share anything that's compromising for anybody involved, but I meant something that a viewer can understand. Like, I made a mistake. I didn't see this coming. And I'm coming at you next, Jeff, on that.
Yeah. I think just understanding AR, I think it's easy to look at one number and just say, this is my total accounts receivable, and it's all the same. And I think something we learned in the process was the need to roll up our sleeves and figure out who the customers are and how they pay and how it all comes together.
That's a good one. I did hear a story about that. That was excellent. And it's good to get through that one.
Yeah.
And you don't learn unless you run into some experiences where you're like, that was tough, uncomfortable, but we muscled through, and now in the future.
Yeah, that's right.
And this deal, Jeff, go ahead.
I mean, I would say that, and I would say kind of related to that is we had, from the moment we met the sellers and the employees, we got along great. And I think that just reinforced to me the sooner we can be in front of people and get to know them and have them get to know us, and then the more often we can get in front of them and them to get to know us, the better the easier it is to go through that negotiation process as human beings, not as adversaries. Because at the end of the day, we've got to link arms and grow this business. And it's funny you said, Lee, that we've had such success. We say all the time, investing starts not, it doesn't end at the closing of a deal, it starts at the closing of a deal. So we are very much at the starting line and have a tremendous amount of work to do, but it's exciting and fun work.
I know how hard it is, and I'm congratulating you for getting across the line, because that is the first obstacle.
It is.
And I'll share with you, it's funny you say this, because we're dealing with over 1,000 private equity firms and family offices across the country. And the moment I get a client under an LOI, within minutes after an LOI is signed by both parties, our client, the seller, and the buyer, I'm immediately connecting everybody with all direct communications. I say, keep us in the loop, but I want you to start talking.
Yeah.
Every private equity company, 95% of them have shockingly almost put their hand over their mouth.
Oh, they're not used to
and
that.
said, wait, why would you do this? I said, well, because you're going to be married for many, many years to come.
Yes.
I think we need to humanize everybody and get you in touch with each other. And they're like, we love working with you. I'm like, I couldn't imagine any other way.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to put you guys on the spot because you've been so good practicing this, okay? Because people will want to get in touch with you, talk to you about your industry, what you've done. I'm going to have you look in the camera and tell people how to get in touch with you. You've been practicing.
I've been
that
practicing,
camera,
Lee.
so you've got to do it. Jonathan as well after Jeff.
Ladies and gentlemen of Atlanta, if you want to get in touch with Southstone Holdings, you can find us on the internet at southstoneholdings.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We post a lot about our investment philosophy, about the things, our observations and experiences, the good and the bad. And so we'd love to talk to you, get to know you.
Jonathan, that's tough to follow, but I'm going to have you do it, Jonathan.
It's a tough
Go
act.
for it.
The only thing I would add is if you are thinking about your legacy and thinking about the next chapter of your business, your people, and your customers, and want someone who's going to steward your business well, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Guys.
That was better than mine. Good job.
I had a little extra time.
Guys, Jeff Heck, Jonathan Zeigler, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show
you, Lee.
today. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I hope this show was as insightful for you as it was for me. We hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.